Hello, my name's Ross Cook. I'm the Cathedral archaeologist at St David's, and in this talk I'm going to be looking at finding St David's, expanding archives through research and investigation. So how are we developing the archive at St David's? By drawing on information from other archives, but also from the archaeological resource that we have on site. So the first thing we need to consider is the current archive at St David's. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a very extensive archive at the cathedral, so we don't have any information on the medieval or post-medieval church, such as inventories, expenses, income, visitations, construction work, or any other information surrounding the day-to-day goings-on at the cathedral. Some of this material reportedly went to the Oxford colleges, and some may have been taken by Gilbert Scott when he was preparing his reports on the cathedral, wanting to be thorough of his information. But much of the archive material went to the National Library during the disestablishment of 1923. Now, the archive does contain information from the 19th century, such as Gilbert Scott's reports and lists of subscribers from the 19th to 20th centuries, which document the people who donated money to support restoration works, alongside many other documents regarding the goings-on at the cathedral. However, when we are trying to understand the cathedral of earlier centuries, particularly trying to get back to the medieval and early post-medieval periods, this is where we really lack information. What the library does have is a wonderful collection of books dating from the early 16th century, though most of these are on canon law and theology, or are Bibles and prayer books, so they aren't going to be a lot of use in understanding St David's in itself. From here, we then need to consider what else on site we can use to help further develop this archive. So whilst we do have a lack of archival material at St David's, we are very fortunate to have a wealth of archaeological material surviving in the close. But what do I mean by archaeological materials? These are the physical remains of the past, such as the buildings, tools and pottery, that can be used to help inform us of how people once lived, but also to help understand how a site or building developed over time. So within the close, we have the very obvious remains of the past in the buildings, such as the Cathedral, Bishop's Palace and Portha Tor, as well as many other smaller buildings. We also have the hidden archaeology, the unseen remains of buildings, gardens and even people that remain buried within the many open spaces of the close. Through these archaeological sites, both buildings and underground, we have a wealth of material that can help provide answers about how and when the cathedral and the close developed. When considering the buildings, the style and form of the architecture help inform us of the time period in which they were conceived and built, and later alterations leave scars to provide clues as to how buildings once looked and how it was changed. For example, the stone arches and clerestory of the nave are stylistically Norman, with Gothic arches to the triforium, which makes it in the Norman transitional style of the late 12th century. Another is the cathedral tower. Although heightened several times in the past, it also provides us with evidence of how the roof has been changed to the nave. The scar in the west elevation shows clearly how the roof was of a much steeper pitch when first built, but then was changed. The roof and nave to the ceiling was always believed to have been 16th century in date, but its unusual form made it difficult to be exact. This is where scientific dating came to help better understand this change. Dendrochronology, or tree ring dating, was undertaken in 2008 by the Oxford Dendrochronology Laboratory. Their work showed the nave roof to have been constructed from felled timbers, which were cut down between 1447 to 70, 1513 to 43, and 1544 to 74, all of which were shown to be of Welsh origin and dispelled the myth that it was of Irish oak. It also showed the roof to be one of the earliest king post roofs in Britain. The underground archaeology is a little harder to get access to, but we know that the open areas of the close all contain buried archaeological remains and deposits. The photo in the left of the screen was taken earlier this year from the top of the tower. It shows parch marks in the grass relating to walls of the former free school that once stood in the site. The lumps and bumps in the fields of the close also give an indication of the past habitation. So, all this material, when understood, researched and reported, can all help to compile an archive of the historic development of the close and what we lack in the historic materials. So how do we move on and develop the archive? The archive can only develop with the input of new materials and through the careful research and seeking out of historic materials that once belonged to it. The idea at St David's is that we'll ensure that any reports on the cathedral, whether they be archaeological, architectural or otherwise, be submitted to the library for archive in physical format, where they can be held safely in perpetuity. With each project, archaeological reports are being produced to document the information observed. This ensures that new information on the cathedral is appropriately recorded and understood. For example, the most recent is a report to document the findings on the library wall investigations for the installation of new shelving. The report sets out the information observed during test patching to see if we have any historic wall finishes or mason's marks surviving. Unfortunately, we don't, but we do have some lovely 1950s emulsion and layers of very hard 1870s lime plaster. We are also making shorter notes to record any minor findings, such as investigations to understand the floor makeup of the Becket Chapel so that a new glass screen and door can be installed, and information on how Gilbert Scott's work rebuilt the parapet of the tower. Alongside the deposition of new material, we hope to work with bodies such as the National Library to access the information that was moved there during the disestablishment in 1923, alongside seeking out materials that may have gone elsewhere. This will be a long process, but in time it will mean that we'll have a fuller archive of information relating to the cathedral's past and its development as the most important religious site in Wales. In this second half, I'm going to run through a case study of how we can use archival material to further our knowledge of a site, but also how to use this material to set a research question. So what you now see on your screen is the Lord Plan of St David's Close, produced in 1720. The plan is held by the National Library and has long been known about and included in several publications and articles. However, the cathedral did not have a copy. Fortunately for us, Mary, the Cathedral Library Development Officer, or librarian for short, arranged with the National Library for this high-resolution digital copy to be produced. The plan provides an important snapshot of how the close looked in the early 18th century. Importantly, the plan shows the close on a much more medieval footprint. From the plan, arrangement and orientation of the domestic buildings, we can see that these are typically medieval or early post-medieval in date. Unfortunately, these were subsequently rebuilt, but the plan helps confirm this took place after 1720. Additionally, the plan also shows fields of the close and indicates that several of these contained ruins of houses or other buildings. Rather fortuitously for the cathedral, we have been working with the Ancient Connections project, linking St David's to Ferns Abbey in Southern Ireland. Through this project, funding was made available for the geophysical investigation of several sites in Pembrokeshire. We put forward the possibility of investigating 3 sites within the close: the Chancellor's Orchard, the Archdeacon of Carden's Ground and the Vicar's College. The research question being, is the Lord Plan accurate? And, as we had archival evidence to test, it seemed like a logical next step and a chance to add further information to our own archive. Fortunately, our 3 sites within the close were chosen to undergo investigation. Arrangements were made for the geophysical survey to be undertaken, and a Section 42 licence was acquired from Cathedral for the geophysical survey of the 3 scheduled monuments. On 28th of August 2020, Sam Roberts of MetGeo came to St David's to undertake the fieldwork. 2 different methodologies were used during the survey: magnetometry and ground penetrating radar. Magnetometry reads the magnetic forces at play in the ground, with anomalies such as stone or burning providing a variance in the readings, which can then be interpreted as buildings, ditches, banks and so on. Ground penetrating radar uses radar pulses directed into the ground, which then reflect from the materials and structures underground. Not only does this have the benefit of showing the size and shape of the objects, but it can also indicate how deep the features are. This information was then processed and interpreted by Sam, and a report detailing his findings was produced. The 3 areas that were subject to investigation are shown here: the Chancellor's Orchard in red, the Archdeacon of Cardigan's Ground in green and the Vicar's College in blue. We're now going to have a closer look at the red area, the Chancellor's Orchard. As I mentioned previously, the Lord Plan shows several areas of the close that contain the remains of ruinous buildings, and the Chancellor's Orchard is one of those areas. The plan records a large structure and names it as the Archdeacon of Carmarthen's grounds and ruins of his house, which leaves little guesswork in knowing what we are looking for or at. The wonderful results of the ground penetrating radar can be seen in the top left of the slide, with the interpretation of the findings to the right. From this, several structures can be identified in the field. Importantly, the buildings shown on the Lord Plan were picked up by the Geophysical Survey and confirmed that the plan was indeed accurate. However, more excitingly, the survey also showed groupings of buildings to the northeast and southwest ends of the field, in areas where nothing had previously been noted. Now, this doesn't come as a complete surprise, as during the medieval period, the close would have been full of housing and buildings associated with a busy religious settlement surrounded by agriculture and industry. At this time, St David's was by no means a cathedral on the periphery. It was well placed near the motorways of the medieval period, the seas, and these gave access to England, Ireland and the continent. The findings of the survey help to confirm that the close may well have been more built up as we suspected. It also demonstrates how archival material can act as a catalyst for further investigation, which in itself then feeds back into our archive and pool of knowledge about St David's. So what do we do from here? The potential next step is to investigate the findings through excavation and to establish and verify the findings of the geophysics. Whilst the geophysics do establish that we are likely dealing with archaeological material, the only method of quantifying the results is through the physical excavation and evaluation of the archaeological features, deposits and materials. This would provide the opportunity to establish dates and a chronological sequence of events for the site, furthering our understanding and knowledge for the evolution of the close as a living, breathing settlement. This would also help to enhance the scheduling of the site and to deepen our understanding of religious settlement in Wales, of which we do not have much information. Of course, as we have discussed several times, this would all feed back into the St David's archive as a body of knowledge for members of the public to digest and enjoy, and for academics to draw from when undertaking their own studies, either of the close or when the lens is on another religious site. If you'd like further information on the library and the material that it contains, or would like to plan a visit, please feel free to contact Mary James on library@stdavidscathedral.org.uk. Or if you'd like to keep up to date with what's been happening in the library, you can follow it on Twitter using the handle @StDavCathLib. Or if you'd like more information on the archaeology, please feel free to contact me on ross.cook@archaeodomus.co.uk, and you can keep up to date with what we're doing on Twitter as well using the handle @archaeodomus. Thank you for taking time to watch this presentation on how we've been developing the Cathedral Archive from an archaeological perspective. We hope that the archive will continue to grow and be a resource to the Cathedral and its visitors for many years to come. For those that are interested, there will be presentations on the progress of archaeological investigations every year during Live Views Week, which will be hosted by the Cathedral, and I'm sure that there will be more presentations like this in the future. Thank you once again, take care and goodbye.